Welcome back. You know her as the co-anchor of the Today Show, but now Savannah Guthrie is showing the world a new side of herself, her relationship to her faith. While she doesn't consider herself a theologian, Savannah says, like so many Americans, she's had a spiritual journey throughout her life, from Sunday school to choir practice. She always saw God as the sixth member of her family. In her book, Mostly What God Does, Savannah explores her relationship with God and how it's impacted the biggest moments of her life. I sat down for a very special Meet the Moment conversation with my NBC News colleague to discuss what she's learned while reflecting on her deeply held beliefs. Why did you want to write this book now?
You know, no one is more surprised than me that I wrote a book about anything, let alone about faith and about God. It's definitely the most personal and vulnerable thing I've ever done.
Well, as someone who's known you for a long time, I have to say one of the most beautiful parts of reading this book is that I hear your voice in every word. Really, I felt like I was sitting with you every time.
For better or worse.
This book. And I think the world gets to hear your voice every morning on TV. But how did you find your written voice, your literary voice?
I love to hear you say that because we are dear friends. And I've had many of my friends say, this is so funny, reading this is like sitting and having coffee with you.
It really is.
Or more likely wine in my case. But, you know, I just wrote my own thoughts. It's really, I tried to make it very simple, very plain, very down to earth, very accessible. It's not a religious tome. I'm the first to put the disclaimer on saying, I'm not a biblical scholar, I'm not a theologian. And I'm not offering myself up as some great example of piety or religious learning. I'm just a regular human who has walked in faith and out of faith over years and years. And these are some of the things that I've learned. And I didn't learn them because everything went well. I learned them mostly when things went wrong, mostly when there were disasters, and disasters often of my own making. And the thrust of the book is very simple. It's simple, but it's not easy. It's called Mostly What God Does. And the rest of the sentence is, mostly what God does is love you.
As you say, you are a person of faith. You grew up with God as the sixth member of your household. Yeah. You say, what do you say to people who feel like they've lost their faith? How do they find it again?
I understand. And I think God understands. We live in a broken world. This is not the world that God intended. And there are hard questions. And I try to talk about those things. Where is God in a world that looks to be full of injustice and despair and suffering? Whether it's what we do in our business by looking at the news every day, or whether it's lives lived where disappointments mount and heartbreak comes and struggle seems constant. I ask those questions. What are we supposed to believe about God? How are we supposed to find him? I don't answer all the existential questions of the universe that are unanswerable. Spoiler alert. If I did, the book would probably be longer and I'd charge more. But I don't think it is a mistake, and I don't think it is a lack of faith to grapple with those doubts. And the number one thing I say is bring those doubts to God. Bring your whole self to God. He's not afraid of our questions.
And you do write very candidly about one of the most painful times in your life, which is losing your father. Mm-hmm. At the age of 16, you say, I remember some of my friends asking if I could still believe in God, if his sudden death at the age of 49 had made me doubt my beliefs. No, I said, this is when I need God the most. But Savannah, I think a lot of people still wonder, how were you able to keep your faith and find such a strong relationship with it all these years later, despite such a devastating loss at such a young age?
Well, you know, when I said that to my friends, I was 16 years old, and that was my first reaction. No, I can't give up God. I can't lose my dad and God, not at the same time. But the rest of my life is a story of any kind of relationship where there's been a breach of trust. And when we have things that come to us that are hard, when we have suffering, it is a breach of trust. I write about this. I don't think that God is the author of evil, suffering, and death. This is not the world that he intended. But the fact of the matter is, and this is what's so difficult, this is the crucible of faith. For whatever reasons we cannot possibly understand right now, he does permit it. This world is still going on in a broken way that is full of heartbreak. And it is very understandable to ask, where is God in those moments? And that is what my life has been about, asking those questions. And I think that what I've learned is it is a relationship. I believe, and this is my leap of faith, that we will one day have a better world on earth as it is in heaven, the one intended. But until that day, we are asked to believe and just draw close to God and believe that he will draw close to us.
You're very candid about the moments in your life when you did not feel close to God, when you could not access your faith. You are doing the hard work. You started that very early with Vale by taking her to church. And I love your mom sent the hymns to you to listen to on your CD.
People keep asking me, do your kids go to church? I'm like, yes, I drag them to church in the grand tradition of all of us who were dragged by our ears on Sunday morning. Yes, I do.
And you do the work yourself.
You have to do the work, but you're right, it's very candid. I write about taking not months, not days, not a few weeks, but years in which, yes, I believed in a distant kind of way, but it's not like I was waking up every morning doing Bible study or had some pious practices or was even living a life that I would want to hold up to some religious scrutiny. No, I was a regular person. And there were times in my life where I was disappointed with the way things had turned out, that I probably did blame God, and I just kind of checked out. And what I learned is that it doesn't matter how much we think of God. It does not matter what we think of God. It doesn't change how he thinks about us. It does not matter. It does not change how he treats us. So this is the big, I think, for me, the big aha, the big message of the book is mostly what God does is love you. And his love has nothing to do with our thoughts of him. It has nothing to do with our actions, good or bad. It has nothing to do with who we are. It has everything to do with who he is.
And you say that having children made you understand God's love for you. How did that revelation happen, Savannah?
I mean, you know this, being a mom is a revelation in every single way. But spiritually, it really was too. There was a moment when I realized when my daughter was born, of course, this love that was unimaginable to me before, and unlike any other I'd experienced, because it's the closest I think we'll ever come to understanding how God relates to us. Because a mother or father's love for their child is unconditional. Again, it doesn't matter how they act. On their worst day, your love is not any different for your daughter. On their worst day, no matter what she does, no matter if she's a snarly teen at 13 and says, I hate you, mommy, you will love her the same. There's not one thing you could do or say for or against that she could do that would make you change your mind about her. When you realize that that's how God feels about us, it's stunning. It's stunningly intimate and tender. It's almost too good to believe.
And Savannah's children's book, Mostly What God Does Is Love You, will be out in February.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.